According to official history, Judaism is the oldest monotheistic religion in the world, dating back some 4,000 years. There are only 14 million Jews in the world today, amounting to 0.2% of the world's population. Most of these Jews live in either Israel or the United States. Traditionally, a person would only consider themselves a Jew if their mother was Jewish. However, in some circles, it is acceptable to become Jewish by publicly declaring oneself as such, together with adopting the Jewish religious faith and many of their practices. In some stricter circles, a formal conversion is required, under the guidance and supervision of a respected rabbi. Jews believe in the one God Yahweh, who first revealed himself to the prophet Abraham, establishing a covenant with Abraham and all his descendants. This agreement led to the Jews believing that they were God's chosen people, who were promised the land of Canaan, where, one day, they would build a great nation.
The Lord had said to Abram, "Go from your country, your people and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing."
Most Jews do not consider Jesus to be the Messiah. However, they do recognize him as a significant figure with prophetic abilities. The Jews are still waiting for their Messiah to appear and believe he will come sometime in the near future to unite and rule over all Jews in the kingdom of Israel, after which there will be peace on earth. Another significant figure in the Judaic tradition is Moses, also a prophet. He was asked by God to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, many of whom at that time were being used as slaves by the Egyptians. Fulfilling God's wishes, Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt, parting the Red Sea in the process, allowing all of his followers to cross over towards the Promised Land. On the way, he stopped at Mount Sinai, where he was given a new set of rules by God, in the form of 10 Commandments. If we analyze the passing of the ages from an astrological perspective, the names given to many biblical characters have greater significance when the ruling planet of those ages are taken into consideration. During the age of Aries, the ram, we see many characters at that time with names referring to rams. This epoch is ruled by the planet Mars, which also appears in various significant names. Abraham, Abram, born at the beginning of the age of Aries. Moses, or Mars, the planet of proactive energy and movement in a specific direction. Moses led the Israelites in a display of proactive movement in a specific direction across the Red Sea towards the Promised Land. Ramesses, Pharaohs Ramesses I to Ramesses XI throughout the New Kingdom period. Tutmosis, Tutmosis I to Tutmosis IV at the beginning of the New Kingdom. Judaism, being a religion which promotes Saturn's energetic characteristics above all the other planets, leads to those specific characteristics being expressed throughout Jewish culture and day-to-day lives. Saturn is the slowest moving of all the visible planets, and as such is synonymous with time. It is Kronos, old Father Time and the teacher. Consequently, it is not surprising to see, as a reflection of these energies, Judaism being the oldest monotheistic religion, which places great emphasis on tradition, scholarship, self-discipline, hard work and career, all characteristics of Saturn. Although Saturn's personified characters throughout history have conjured up some dark, sinister and frightening images, Saturn's energies are not all bad. By aligning one's cultural identity with Saturn, it will, in time, manifest benefits of a material nature, promoting those under its influence into positions of control within organized structures of authority. Because Saturn is the cross of materialism over the crescent of spirituality, it promotes all things of a material nature in favor of those of spirituality. This is why some old school Christians considered the Judaic God of the Old Testament to be the demiurge, the god of the material realm. The zodiac, as a diagrammatic expression of our conscious connection to the universe, offers insights of a profound nature. Consequently, when we analyze the zodiac signs and houses under the domain of Saturn, we find metaphysical correlations between astrology and Judaism. Saturn rules two houses of the zodiac: Aquarius, I know, and Capricorn, I use. Both intelligence and usury are synonymous with Jewish culture and history. The 10th house is concerned with public persona, social reputation, career path, and substantial achievements. It is sometimes called the house of world leaders, as it shows us how we fulfill our destiny from hard work and perseverance over the course of one's lifetime. It is the house of family tradition, legacy, roots and ancestry. It is a cardinal earth sign which promotes proactive initiation of material matters relating to career, business, and our social interactions on a world stage. Consequently, because it is the house of career and hard work, although Jews are only 2 to 3% of the American population, they make up almost half of the country's billionaires. With the motto for Capricorn being I use, usury comes into the picture, the most powerful of all forms of control, dominated by offshoots of the Jewish establishment. Aligned with the energetic characteristics of Saturn, through the practice of traditional Judaism, some Jews naturally excel in areas of control, restriction, organization, and materialism, culminating throughout the modern practice of fractional reserve banking. When the Piscean age is divided up into another 12 houses of the zodiac, it can be seen that between the years of 1472 and 1742, when Saturn ruled the outer wheel, many prominent Jewish families excelled in the areas of banking and business. Throughout this period, Saturn's influence propelled many people to get to work and work hard, within the confines of discipline, responsibility, limitations, and restrictions. Saturn Kronos governs time, along with organizations, structure, and order. The commercial revolution was underway, with expanding trade routes and empires. The most disciplined and structured organizations began to dominate, spreading their influence across all corners of the known world. Kronos' influence brought forward the mechanical clock. Due to the invention of the escapement mechanism, oscillating timekeeping devices and spring-driven clocks began to appear in the 15th century, flourishing over the next 100 years. The whole concept of the clock changed society, governing the day-to-day lives of the majority of working people, a major tool in commanding the workforce to get to work and to work hard. For commerce to thrive with ease, a fluid mechanism of exchange was necessary. The first modern private central banks appeared, like the Bank of England in 1694, an institution created to enable government and industry to borrow large sums of money with ease. The 11th house of Aquarius, I know, is the house of groups, friends, and goals, a house which seeks intellectual security, where collaboration, shared visions, and community find ways to express collective objectives. The detachment and individuality associated with Aquarius is here helping to see beyond the familiarity of this known reality. The house of Aquarius is where the mind and its goals merge with others, promoting the power of the group, whether that group be a club, network, or a professional association. The hermit in tarot represents energies associated with Aquarius. He is the wise hermit, I know, standing on the double wave of Aquarius, holding a lamp which illuminates the left-hand path with a six-pointed star, a star which represents Saturn, the traditional ruling planet of Aquarius. Just like Christianity and Islam, various forms of offshoots deviated from the basic concept of traditional Judaism. For centuries, traditional Judaism mainly focused on admirable and peaceful qualities associated with Saturn, keeping their social and moral structure together, underpinned by the writing contained within the Torah and the commandments. However, over time, perverted offshoots began to appear, some of which were so extreme and sinister that even the most liberal rabbis rejected them as abominations to the faith. Traditional Orthodox Jews believe that the Jewish exile, which began around 69 AD, was an edict, a decree from God, which scattered the Jews out among the nations. They were not to return en masse to form any kind of sovereign nation until God, with a new decree, allowed them to do so. God also promised that the Jews would have his protection whilst they lived out among non-Jewish nations. It is believed by non-Zionist Jews that if they forced the redemption too soon and rebelled against God's wishes, all attempts and efforts would ultimately be doomed to failure. It is for this reason why many Orthodox Jews do not support the concept and actions of the Zionist movement.
And the Lord shall scatter you among the nations, and ye shall be left few in number among the heathen, whither the Lord shall lead you.
Many Orthodox Jews, like Rabbi Yisrael David Wise, hold the opinion that most practicing Jews who are faithful to the Torah do not support the concept and actions of the Zionist movement. They believe Zionism, by its nature of forcing the redemption issue are antagonistic to the wishes and edicts of the Almighty God, and by forcing the resettlement of Jews back to Israel will ultimately bring about their own end through the wrath of God.
Zionism is a new movement, a transformation from the religious into a base, materialistic, nationalistic movement, to have a piece of land which is forbidden for the Jews.
One theory which ties Ashkenazi Jews to the Khazars is a theory which has many critics among mainstream academia. It suggests that the Ashkenazi Jews originated from the medieval Khazarian Empire, giving them a different genealogy to the Semitic Jews altogether. Although this theory has been widely attacked, it is still considered credible by some circles. During the 8th century, King Bulan of the Khazarian Empire had a dilemma. He was surrounded by expanding empires on all sides, Christians to the west and north, and Muslims to the south. He concluded that if his people converted to Christianity, they would be targeted by the Muslims from the south. Conversely, if they converted to Islam, he would be attacked by the Christians from the north and west. Eager to stay in power and continue being a significant trading hub, he decided the best option would be to convert en masse to Judaism. This would allow the king to stay relatively neutral while keeping his kingdom and trading options open. These Jews became known as Ashkenazi Jews and seen as a different subrace to the Semitic Jews of Canaan within the Middle East. Over the centuries, as the Khazarian Empire crumbled, many Ashkenazi Jews moved west to Eastern Europe, to places like the Ukraine, Poland, and parts of Russia. Although the Ashkenazi Jews had accepted the faith of Judaism and practiced its rituals and ceremonies, they were considered by many Semitic Jews as second-rate and not part of the 12 tribes of Israel. Because of this, throughout most of history, the Semitic Jews would not allow intermarriage between the two groups. However, over the past 150 years, this has become more accepted. The main difference between the Ashkenazi and Semitic Jews, apart from biological lineage, was their attitude towards the Judaic faith. According to the scholar of Jewish history, Mohammed Rafiq, the Semitic Jews centered their faith around the Torah, the Old Testament, using the Talmud as a side commentary, whereas the Ashkenazi Jews centered their faith around the Talmud and Zohar, mystical teachings known as Kabbalah, while pushing the Torah to one side. This created two very different ideologies, especially concerning the Messiah and a return to the land of Israel. While the Semitic Jews had no desire to relocate themselves back to the Promised Land, without God giving them a signal to do so with the arrival of a new Messiah. The Ashkenazi Jews were happy to initiate the return to Israel before the Messiah appeared, believing that a return to Israel would promote his appearance in the process. Between 1534 and 1572, Isaac ben Solomon Luria, known in Jewish circles as Ari the Lion, was developing his own version of Kabbalism. He lived in the small town of Safed in Upper Galilee. After the expulsion of the Sephardic Jews from Spain in 1492, a time when a Jewish mystical renaissance was taking hold, Lurianic Kabbalism became the new foundation of the Judaic Zohar. During this time, an urgency was felt among many Kabbalistic Jews towards hasting a messianic redemption. Consequently, new rituals were developed with a communal messianic focus. From this new Lurianic Kabbalistic approach to mystical Judaism, some interesting yet sinister ideologies emerged.
This calls for wisdom. Let the person who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. That number is 666.
In 1626, Sabbati Zevi was born into a Jewish family in the city of Smyrna on the east coast of present-day Turkey. As a student, he was fascinated with mysticism and Kabbalah. It was rumored that the followers of Lurianic Kabbalism could communicate with God and his angels, predict the future, and perform magic and miracles. From his fascination with mysticism, he became a well-known ordained rabbi and Lurianic Kabbalist throughout the Ottoman Empire. In 1648, at the age of 22, Sabbati Zevi, riding on an international wave of messianic anticipation, suggested to his small group of followers that he was the long-awaited Messiah. To prove himself, he would pronounce the biblical name of God, a practice prohibited to all except the Most High priests. He also told his followers that he could fly, but would not do so in public to people unworthy of his display of magic. On top of this, he claimed that he had regular visions of God, confirming his messianic claim. Because he was only 22 at the time, older rabbis did not take him seriously and saw him as a mischievous upstart. A few years later, now in his early 30s, he was banished from Smyrna for his outrageous claims, only to appear in Constantinople in 1658. It was around this time that Sabbati Zevi met a preacher named Abraham Yakini, who was believed to have forged a document in ancient characters legitimizing Sabbati's claim as the new Messiah.
I, Abraham, was confined in a cave for 40 years, and I wondered greatly that the time of miracles did not arrive. Then was heard a voice proclaiming, "A son will be born in the Hebrew year 5386, the year 1626 CE, to Mordecai Zevi, and he will be called Sabbati. He will humble the great dragon. He, the true Messiah, will sit upon my throne."
Around 1659, he moved to Salonika. At that time, it was the center of Kabbalistic studies among Jewish scholars. After spending some time putting on mystical events in an effort to increase his following, his antics drew the attention of senior rabbis, who once more banished him from the city. After traveling for a while, he eventually settled in Cairo, where he stayed for around 2 years. Here he met Raphael Joseph, a wealthy Jewish tax revenue manager for the Ottoman Empire. Although extremely wealthy and charitable, Joseph preferred a life of abstinence and fasting. After a short period of time, he became drawn into Sabbati's messianic claims, and from then on would help support Sabbati Zevi's projects. After Cairo, Sabbati went to Jerusalem, where he continued to promote his messianic claims, bolstered by regular episodes of fasting. At this point, he gained prestige among the elders of the city due to his close friendship with Raphael Joseph, who, from time to time, would help with the heavy tax levies imposed on Jerusalem by the Ottoman government. On a trip to Gaza, Sabbati Zevi met Nathan Benjamin Levy, an active supporter of Zevi's messianic claims. They became great friends, and eventually Nathan would become Zevi's right-hand man. In 1665, Nathan announced that the messianic age was almost upon them and would peak in the following year. Furthermore, the new Messiah would conquer the world without bloodshed and lead the 10 lost tribes of Israel back to the Holy Land. Although Sabbati Zevi was respected for his relationship with wealthy backers, his messianic claims began to arouse suspicion among the high levels of rabbis within the city. They told him that Jerusalem was not the city where he should be unveiling his prestige, and threatened him with excommunication. Consequently, he left disappointed and headed back to his hometown of Smyrna. At this point, Nathan suggested Gaza, not Jerusalem, would be a better place to reveal his messianic claim to the world. As a result, Sabbati Zevi and his followers descended on Gaza. They received a great welcome. By the end of the year, he found himself back in his hometown of Smyrna, where, at the celebrations for the Jewish New Year, he publicly announced himself as the new Messiah. This announcement was followed by trumpet playing and shouts of "Long live the King, our Messiah." It was clear at this stage that he was generating a great deal of interest. Whether he had the credentials or not seemed irrelevant to many of his followers. He was fulfilling their eager anticipation and expectation for the coming year of 1666. It ultimately became a self-fulfilling prophecy, with Zevi and Nathan delivering the goods. 1666 became an important year for the Messianic movement. Zevi became leader of Smyrna, deposing the previous rabbi, placing his own followers in top positions. As the word spread, more and more Jews, eagerly wanting their own Messiah, began to believe in him. Throughout Europe, Sabbatean Jewish centers opened, dedicated to Zevi's messianic cause, eventually attracting around 1 million followers. Zevi's secretary compiled a statement which was to be sent out to all Jews.
The first begotten Son of God, Sabbati Zevi, Messiah and Redeemer of the people of Israel, to all the sons of Israel, peace. Since ye have been deemed worthy to behold the great day and the fulfillment of God's word by the prophets, your lament and sorrow must be changed into joy, and your fasting into merriment. For ye shall weep no more. Rejoice with song and melody, and change the day formerly spent in sadness and sorrow into a day of jubilee, because I have appeared.
Sometime in early 1666, Sabbati Zevi left on a trip to Constantinople. Believing in his own propaganda and importance, he was under the illusion that the Sultan of Constantinople would welcome him with open arms. However, when he arrived, the Sultan had already sent out an order for his immediate arrest. While Zevi languished in prison, his close circle of followers disseminated reports of a contrary nature, spreading rumors out into the Jewish community, telling of how Sabbatai's wonderful and miraculous deeds were being received in Constantinople. Unconcerned at the gravity of his predicament, both Sabbatai and his followers believed, with God's help, their new Messiah would prevail. At this point, especially being an important date within Judaism, many powerful onlookers were becoming increasingly anxious towards its spreading popularity and potential disruption to the established status quo. For this reason, the Sultan gave Sabbatai 3 choices. 1. Subject himself to a volley of arrows, and if the archers missed, his divinity would be proven. 2. Be impaled. 3. Convert to Islam. The very next day, after pondering on his options, Sabbatai Zevi, the self-proclaimed Jewish Messiah, was taken to stand before the Sultan, where he proceeded to take off his Jewish clothes and place a Turkish turban on his head, an act which confirmed his conversion to Islam. Delighted at the spectacle, the Sultan accepted Zevi's conversion and gave him the new name of Muhammad Effendi. Following the conversion, the Sultan was more than happy to inform Sabbatai's followers, together with the greater Jewish community, of the happy news. While both Christians and Muslims fell over each other laughing, throughout Jewish circles it was taken very badly as a tremendously bitter disappointment. However, 300 of Sabbatai Zevi's close followers, along with their families, suspecting that the conversion was insincere, also converted to Islam as a show of allegiance to their Messiah. These Jewish Muslims became known as Donma. They based their community in Salonika, where northern Greece is now, and are still there to this day. After a few years of pretending to be a Muslim, Zevi was discovered singing psalms with fellow Jews. Consequently, he was banished from Constantinople and moved to Dulcigno, a small town where Montenegro is now. Sabbatai Zevi died in 1676 in relative isolation. According to mainstream consensus regarding Jewish history, the story of Sabbatai Zevi ends with his death. However, this perspective is far from the truth. After his downfall and later death, many of his followers, now called Sabbateans, went underground. They formed secret societies and groups which, on the exterior, took on the religion of their host country, while in secret still practicing Lurianic Kabbalism. Some Sabbatean groups morphed into some rather dark and sinister cult movements. 50 years after the death of Sabbatai Zevi, Jacob Frank was born to a family of Sabbateans in Buchach, East Poland. Purporting to be the reincarnation of both Sabbatai Zevi and Abraham's grandson Jacob, Frank, on the back of the Sabbatean movement, developed an unusual and perverted form of Judaism, which violated many traditional Jewish laws and customs. Wife-swapping orgies became a common occurrence, referred to by the Sabbatean priests as purification through transgression. Although sexual immorality was encouraged, severe self-discipline, which avoided various forms of indulgence, was practiced in other areas of their lives. From this Sabbatean base, Jacob Frank took his new religion to the next level. After proclaiming himself the reincarnation of Sabbati Zevi and a new Messiah in 1751, Frank moved to Podolia, a city in the southwest part of the Ukraine. Here he began to preach what he had gained from the Dogma back in Salonika. After some time, Frank's teachings drew the attention of some senior rabbis, who, after hearing his preaching, found it to be unacceptable and forced him out of the city. After hearing about sexual promiscuity within the sect, under the guise of mystical symbolism, the rabbis concluded that many of Frank's followers and the Sabbateans in general were breaking fundamental Jewish laws on morality and modesty. In 1756, the rabbis proclaimed excommunication against all impenitent heretics, asking all pious Jews to keep a vigilant lookout in order to expose them. Jacob Frank publicly announced that he was the true successor to Sabbati Zevi, and that God had instructed him and his followers to convert to Christianity, whilst all the time concealing their inner identity as Sabbatean Kabbalistic mystics. Most of the Frankists were baptized in the Ukrainian town of Lor. Frank himself was baptized on the 17th of September 1759, and again the very next day witnessed by Augustus III, who acted as his godfather. Records show that by 1790, 26,000 Polish Jews had officially converted to Christianity. Although Frank and his followers had publicly converted to Christianity, senior members of the clergy viewed them with suspicion, which on the 6th of February 1760 was proven correct. Frank was caught teaching heresy, which led to his arrest and a 13-year imprisonment. Apart from discouraging and deterring his followers, his incarceration gave him the mystique of a martyr. Both the Sabbatean and Frankist movements were reversals of Judaic principles. Being messianic movements, they tried to do what was necessary to bring forth the new Messiah. Because the Talmud says the Messiah would appear at a time when everyone is either all good or all bad, it is possible that they concluded that it was far easier to be all bad than all good. Therefore, still fulfilling the requirements which would bring about the Messiah, leading to the new kingdom and world peace, they believed that by being all bad, they were still doing God's work.
Our Johanan also said, "The son of David will come only in a generation that is either altogether righteous or altogether wicked. In a generation that is altogether righteous, as it is written, thy people also shall be all righteous, they shall inherit the land forever. Or altogether wicked, as it is written, and he saw that there was no man, and wondered that there was no intercessor. And it is elsewhere written, for mine own sake, even for mine own sake, will I do it."
Jacob Frank's Kabbalistic movement taught that the concept of evil is only in the minds of the Gentiles, and that in this world there is no such thing as pure evil. They believed that good comes from the right hand of God, and what the Gentiles considered as evil comes from God's left hand. Anyone with this ideology would consider murder, rape, incest, blood drinking, and sexual immorality as perfectly acceptable forms of behavior, believing that if the whole world participated in this form of behavior, they would help to hasten and bring forth the new Messiah. Kabbalists believe that both good and evil exist as expressions of divine energy, being complementary aspects within universal consciousness. Unlike most religions where evil exists outside of God, some Kabbalists see evil as an essential part of divinity and the creation, where evil originates at the very core of divine consciousness. The comprehension of good can only be understood through the exploration of evil, just as we appreciate the beauty of the sun far more after we have experienced the rain. Through the promotion of evil, misery, and tragedy, we are able to understand and appreciate compassion, kindness, and all the good things life has to offer. For the conscious mind to gain a higher and deeper level of understanding, it must explore the subconscious and the underworld, thereby gaining knowledge of those darker aspects of itself. Only when the ego is broken down can the subconscious be allowed in, signaling a deeper and more meaningful spiritual transformation, thereby adding extra dimensions of consciousness through the healing process. Evil derives from the separation of unity. The diabolos divides and abolishes all things united, bringing forth new opportunities out of the chaos created. Through destruction, deconstruction, disintegration, and chaos, humanity has the potential to achieve higher degrees of consciousness derived from its understanding and experience of the evil generated.
The sinner who repents is on a higher level than the saint who has never sinned.
For Kabbalists, to deny evil in the world is to deny God, and through the experience of both good and evil, they are able to come closer to God in a reciprocal union of consciousness. By going deep within in an attempt to embrace our dark side, we might come to terms with our baser desires, where the subconscious can evolve to the next level. To be complete, we must include a dark side. Only then do we have the potential to refine ourselves within a divine furnace of subconscious purification.
There is no light except that which issues from darkness, and no true good except if perceived from evil. From the Kabbalistic point of view, evil brings into the world the possibility of choosing between sin and virtue, which is to say that evil is the very origin of the possibility of the highest good. Freedom of choice is a necessary postulate for responsibility and morality and the creation of values. Evil becomes the condition for free choice, and hence the condition for the full realization of good. You can't reject evil, because evil is the brighter of the light. The evil one is holy. God could not create true freedom for humanity without giving us a choice between good and evil. The stirring up of conflict is a Luciferian virtue in the true sense of the word. Conflict engenders fire, the fire of affects and emotions. Unlike every other fire, it has two aspects, that of combustion and that of creating light.
According to Kabbalists, the greater the impulse for evil, the greater the potential for good. Consequently, with this philosophy in mind, if Kabbalists found their way into positions of power, the world would see a great deal of division being promoted in order to foment evil for what the Kabbalists believe to be an improvement of overall human consciousness.
The Frankists' modus operandi, namely, through false conversions and phony renunciations of Judaism, gaining the trust of the ecclesiastical powers which obtained for them the protection of the state to carry out their seditious plans.
According to the research of Mohammed Rafiq, during the latter part of Frank's life, he had networked his Kabbalistic version of Judaism out into the wider community, connecting with wealthy and influential people, including the Rothschild banking dynasty and Adam Weishaupt, the founder of the Bavarian Illuminati. According to Rafiq, it was Frank who instructed Weishaupt to set up the Illuminati with the help of Rothschild's money. Frank also instructed a number of followers to go to Poland and set up a variety of factories in order to prosper and make great wealth. In Elias Stern's book, Jewish Materialism, the Intellectual Revolution of the 1870s, he suggests, as a backlash to Jewish conditions within the Pale of Settlements, a group of Russian Jews began to reform Judaism and Jewish ideology towards the material aspect of the universe.
Principally, the ideology defined Judaism and Jewish identity within the material aspect of the universe. Jews in Russia during this time began to reform Judaism, looking towards its resources, which could shed light on the fair distribution of wealth. That would become the start of a whole host of Jewish political movements, including Bundism, Zionism and territorialism. All of these ideologies began with one fundamental idea, that Jewish identity is fundamentally rooted in the physical material world.
Judaism holds the highest position of all the monotheistic religions on the tree of life. Being aligned with the Sephirot Bina, an energy vortex ruled by Saturn, it is the closest religion to the Creator. Bina is the third Sephirot within the supernal triad. It is considered to be the divine feminine, a power which presides over the 7 lower Sephirot and the source from which they emanate.
Bina is the great revealing one who bestows the structure of the Absolute onto the created. The King Messiah is the secret of Bina, and when the time for the redemption of Israel will arrive, the Holy One, blessed be He, who is Kitari, lion, will cause him to smell all those fine smells and perfumes that attribute called Messiah, as it is written, and the spirit of Elohim is hovering over the face of the water. This is the spirit of the Messiah then, the Bina, which is Messiah, judges the poor in a right man, namely Knesset Israel, because she arouses stern judgment and justice onto the nations of the world. Thus, we find in the emphasis on the redemptive nature of the third Sephirah, designated as the Redeemer and Higher Messiah, a clear tendency to depict the return of the emanative process to the source, a restoration of the primordial, a circular concept of what I propose to call a cosmic macrochronos, and not a historical rectilinear vision of history which ends or culminates in the Messianic era.
According to Judaic Kabbalism, Saturn, Bina, and redemption are related to one another. The name Sabbati is Hebrew for the planet Saturn.
His name literally meant the planet Saturn, and in Jewish tradition the reign of Sabbati, the highest planet, was often linked to the advent of the Messiah. And since it is higher than all the 7 planets, it is appointed upon religions and buildings, and because the planet of Sabbati is appointed over the perpetuation, when it will arrive to the ascent, it will not decline forever, as it is said that the Spirit of God dwells upon him, the Spirit of Hokmah and of Bina. See and understand that this is the secret of Mashiach. This is the reason why every ascent of Israel is but by the means of commandments. When they draw upon themselves the power of the Bina, see and understand that the planet Sabbati has the crown of Bina.
It is thought that Sabbati Zevi was initially named Sabbati because he was born on the Sabbath, Saturn's day. This was a custom at the time, which possibly contributed and influenced his own beliefs, seeing himself as the new Messiah. It is generally understood that the redemption of the Messiah would ascend from the third Sephiroth, Bina. It is also the belief of some Kabbalists that both the left and right-hand path originate from God. Therefore, a Messiah, whether he comes from the third Sephiroth on the tree of life or the third Cliffoth on the tree of death, is not important, because good and evil are just relative concepts. All that matters to some Kabbalists is that all the circumstances are in place for the new Messiah to appear. The Frankist movement was regarded as an extreme and perverted cult of Sabbatean Judaism, a movement rejected by rabbis within the Council of Four Lands and the majority of Jews faithful to the Torah and traditional Judaic laws. This culminated in claims of incest, blasphemy, heresy, and an overall attempt to invert and pervert Judaism. In 1759, this ultimately led to 2,000 Frankists within the city of Lvov being excommunicated by the moderate mainstream Jewish community of the time. This policy of excommunication put a great deal of pressure on those within the Frankist movement. The ban included the following statement:
We shall not rent a house to or from them. We shall not buy from them or sell to them. We shall not teach their children, nor bury them, nor circumcise them.
This added pressure contributed to Jacob Frank's decision to convert over to Catholicism, persuading thousands of his followers who later followed suit. Publicly, they would appear to be Catholics, but privately, many of them despised the church and continued to practice and promote their extreme version of Sabbatean mysticism. As part of the conversion process, they were asked to declare the Talmud as nonsensical and a pack of lies, while still maintaining their recognition for the Zohar. They also had to admit that their fellow Jews did indeed use the blood of Christian children to make matzot, unleavened bread, for the Passover. Jacob Frank once addressed his followers with these words:
I came not to elevate your spirits, but to humiliate you to the bottom of the abyss, where you can get no lower, and where no man can rise from by his own forces, but only God can pull him with his mighty hand from the depth.
Gershom Scholem, one of the world-leading authorities on Jewish Kabbalah, wrote about Jacob Frank.
Jacob Frank, 1726 to 91, will always be remembered as one of the most frightening phenomena in the whole of Jewish history. A religious leader who, whether for purely self-interested motives or otherwise, was in all his actions a truly corrupt and degenerate individual.
Once out of prison, Frank was free to circulate among the rich and influential elements of European Jewish society, no doubt in an attempt to spread his Sabbatean philosophy and to recruit new sponsors.
Where Frank obtained the money for the upkeep of his court was a constant source of wonder and speculation, and the matter was never resolved. Doubtless some system of taxation was organized among the members of the sect. Stories circulated about the arrival of barrels of gold sent, some say, by his followers, but according to others, by his foreign political employers. The Frankist elite consisted of a circle of very gifted intellectuals, theologians and men of letters, as well as a group of men of great financial means who were for the most part great merchant bankers and exerted tremendous influence in their day in the highest financial circles of Europe.
On his travels, Jacob Frank would outline his perverted ideologies in sermons, meetings, and presentations, providing an overview to future converts as to what to expect from the cult which he was promoting. Not only was he inverting all those righteous and positive messages found in the traditional Judaic interpretation of the Torah, but he wanted to destroy all existing systems of both religious and social structures, with a view to creating a new order from the chaos which he and his followers hoped to foment.
Wherever Adam trod, a city was built, but wherever I set foot, all will be destroyed. For I come into this world only to destroy and to annihilate, but what I build will last forever.
Frank was under the impression that in order for humanity to ascend to greater levels of conscious awareness, they must first descend down to the very bottom rung of existence. Only from the bottom of the mountain can humanity climb to the very top, where infinite consciousness can be grasped and understood. The Frankists aspired to a future time when every righteous religious belief system had been eradicated, initiating a global revolution which could sweep away the past and begin the process of rebuilding society from the very bottom.
I did not come into this world to lift you up, but rather to cast you down to the bottom of the abyss. Further than this it is impossible to descend, nor can one ascend again by virtue of one's own strength, for only the Lord can raise one up from the depths by the power of his hand. Since we cannot all be saints, let us all be sinners.
All this pessimistic rhetoric which Frank promoted influenced many impressionable minds throughout Europe prior to the French Revolution, a revolution which would ultimately dismantle the old custodians of traditional standards of morality. In 1786, Frank moved from Moravia to Offenbach, on the outskirts of Frankfurt, the same city where the Rothschild banking cartel began and the home of Adam Weishaupt. For these three to be in the same city at the same time, in my view, is not a matter of innocent coincidence. It opened up an opportunity which allowed the coordination of big projects to manifest easily with big money. In Offenbach, Frank lived a regal lifestyle underpinned by some of the biggest banking houses in the city. He was even given the title of Baron of Offenbach. After Jacob Frank's death in 1791, his nihilistic Frankist nephews, Moses and Emmanuel Dobruska, went to Paris to join the Jacobins, a group of political revolutionaries promoting anti-royal sentiments together with the dismantlement of the old political order. Both Moses and Emmanuel changed their surnames to Frey and became heavily involved in the French Revolution. By 1794, with the end of the Reign of Terror, both brothers were executed for treason, using a new execution device called the guillotine.
As long as the last divine sparks of holiness and good which fell at the time of Adam's primordial sin into the impure realm of the Qliphoth have not been gathered back again to their source, so the explanation and the process of redemption is incomplete. It is therefore left to the Redeemer, the holiest of men, to accomplish what not even the most righteous souls in the past have been able to do, to descend through the gates of impurity into the realm of the Qliphoth, and to rescue the divine spark still imprisoned there. As soon as this task is performed, the kingdom of evil will collapse of itself, for its existence is made possible only by the divine sparks in its midst. The Messiah is constrained to commit strange acts, of which his apostasy is the most startling. All of these, however, are necessary for the fulfillment of his mission.
The Sabbatean Frankists believed that the New World Order had begun with the arrival of their Messiah, Sabbati Zevi, whose messianic soul reincarnated into Jacob Frank. To the Frankists, this meant everything to do with the old world, its systems of religion and political order, had to be dismantled, a process which they thought must be achieved through any means necessary. Furthermore, because their Messiah had set a precedence of concealing his true intentions through apostasy, hiding behind another religion, his followers were also expected to conceal their true leanings towards nihilistic Frankism. For the Frankists to believe that the more they sinned, the more they hastened the coming of redemption is contrary to all those who were trying to climb the tree of life, walking a difficult path of righteousness and high standards of morality. This includes traditional Judaism as well as Muslims, Christians and Buddhists alike. According to Gershom Scholem, Sabbatean nihilists regarded violating the Torah of Beria on the most consecrated ground of all, Israel, the supernal triad, to be the pinnacle of sinning, which would bring about special significance with profound revelations. For those on the side of righteousness, they regarded anyone who attempted to descend down the tree of death, for whatever reason, even if they were trying to destroy the Qliphoth with their holiness, were deluded. It is believed that once a person falls into the arms of Satan and his entourage, they would find it virtually impossible to return, a position where even the Lord would not pardon them.